Chapter 20 of 40,000 Miles Over Land and Water. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Prajakta. 40,000 Miles Over Land and Water by Ethel Gwendoline Vincent. The home of the Parsees. Monday, February 9th. Sir Jamshedji Gigi Boy very kindly called for us in the morning with his brake and magnificent pair of English carriage horses, undertaking to show us something of Bombay. Sir Jamshedji is the well-known and respected head of the Parsees, whose home may be said to be in Bombay. The Parsees claim to follow the oldest religion in the world, that of the Persian religion of Zoroaster, the fire worshipper, and of the 100,000 which their set numbers, 60,000 live in Bombay. Rampart Row leads to the banyan bordered avenue of the Maidan or park, but leaving this to our right, we drove on to the Esplende, the broad open space facing the sea which contains such a magnificent series of public buildings. Here are the Secretariat, the University Hall and Library designed by Sir Gilbert Scott, the Post Office, the Clock Tower with its carillons, the municipal offices and the High Court, all pretty edifices in the architectural fancifulness of color and design, of buff brick with red, of interlacing arches and pillars. We surveyed this fine block from the parade ground where a small body of troops were being exercised and some young ladies enjoying their early morning canter, for it was as yet but 7 a.m. Then we drove along Queen's Road, the fashionable evening drive. I was going to say it bordered the seashore, but unfortunately the line of the railway intervenes between it and the sea. This is the road which might be paved with gold, so great was the amount of the funds sunk by the company formed for the reclamation of this strip of land. It was the scene of ruin and despair for many of the Bombay citizens whose fortunes disappeared with the progress of the road. We looked into the Crawford markets for a minute and were surprised at the order and cleanliness, the exception to the rule that where the native reigns there is filth, disorder and uncleanness. Then Sir Jamshedji took us to the art school founded by his grandfather, the first baronet, by the gift of lakh of rupees. Mr. Griffith, an old South Kensingtonian, showed us through the various rooms where, beginning with freehand drawing up to modeling from their own designs, we saw classes of pupils receiving lessons here at the nominal fee of 1 rupee per month. Then we went across to the pottery works where Bombay ware is manufactured. This is a specialty of the city. The antique shapes of the vases and pots are often designed from the frescoes found in the caves of Ajanta, and they are colored in rich and peculiar blues, browns and greens. It is very interesting to watch the pupils at work, for each article is drawn and colored separately by hand. We drove through and in and out of the native quarter, which is much broader and cleaner than that at Calcutta. Hindu temples abound, with their throng of worshippers passing constantly up and down the steps and touching as they enter the deep toned bell, thus keeping it ceaselessly tolling. One street was quite blocked by an immense crowd streaming down a narrow byway. They were Hindus going to pay their daily visit, rarely omitted to present a customary offering in kind to their bishop, a fat old man who sits almost naked in the court to receive their homage. Remains of the enthusiastic admiration of Lord Ripon on his departure from Bombay still remain in the long leave Ripon. Dear Empress, send us another Ripon. A grateful people admire thee, O Ripon, inscribed over the doorways of the native houses. They say that no sight has ever equaled the extraordinary enthusiasm, the enormous crowds that lined the 6 miles of road from Government House at Parel to the Apollo Bandar at Bombay. Not even on the occasion of the Prince of Wales's arrival were such masses of human beings seen. Then we went to the hospital and home for animals, a very novel institution also founded and endowed by Sir Jamshedji's father for a sum of 10 lakh of rupees. To understand its full use and the benevolence of its purpose, it must be remembered that, according to the law of their religion, no Hindu is allowed to kill an animal. It may be tortured in agony, it may be blind and lame, or if unable to work, turn out into the streets to be ill used, starve, and die, but never must it be put out of its misery. A pious Hindu will often pay some rupees to save an animal about to be slaughtered by the butcher and will afterwards bring it here to the home. All animals lamed or maimed are received into this general hospital and attended to by a veterinary surgeon. In the stalls full of oxen, we saw some with a foot amputated, others with sore backs or skin diseases, others blind or otherwise injured. Horses, oxen, dogs, goats, cats, fowls, ducks, even 2 porcupines and a tortoise are sheltered in this refuge. There is the hospital where those are sent who are very ill, and it is quite pathetic to see the poor animals here turning and looking dumbly at us as if asking for compassion. When convalescent or case is pronounced incurable, they are sent up to the Mofussil or country home for change of air or else to pass the remainder of their natural term of existence leading an easy, pleasant life in the compound. Those cured are sometimes given to people who are known to be human but never sent back to work. Such are the peculiar provisions and working of the hospital for animals. We are certainly very much pleased with Bombay when compared to Calcutta. There is so much more to see, so many more places to drive to. How charming we thought the quaint little corner by the sea, the well known Apollo Bandar, jutting out in 3 cornered fashion from the wharf. How familiar we became with 2 characteristic features of Bombay: the Arab horses that are used almost exclusively, and the high cones of the peculiar Parsee helmet. There is always Back Bay to look at, with the quiet expanse of water at high tide, the slush with mussel shells at low tide, lying and taking generous sweep inwards between the projecting promontories of Colaba and Malabar, or between the Government House on the latter point and the lighthouse on the tongue of the former. The Queen's Road with the high walls of the burning ghat, whence at night issues a lurid flame, runs round to the bottom of Malabar Hill. All the Europeans reside on Malabar Hill, and the many handsome bungalows, Hardly bungalows they can be called, considering that they are nearly all two-storied, lie about among the palm groves facing seawards and overlooking the harbour. The sea surrounds Malabar Point, thus from both sides they catch stray breezes wandering about in summer time. At the prettiest bungalow on Malabar Hill, that of the Commissioner of Police, Sir Frank Sudhar, with whom lives the of Chief Justice Sir Charles Sargent, we were destined subsequently to spend a very pleasant evening. The ladies' gymkhana is a special feature of the hill, and here tennis and badminton in covered courts is played every evening, whilst the children hold their own reception amongst the swings and merry-go-rounds, arriving on their donkeys and ponies with their numerous attendants. When seen, as we did this evening, with the crimson sunset over the sea, the light just appearing in the clock tower of the Secretariat away down in Bombay, with the single bright lights dotted along Queen's Road, Malabar Hill looked very beautiful. And then, as we came down the steep hill and met all the residents returning home in the dusk after listening to the band on the esplanade, we looked up and saw the three electric lights which have just been placed at the summit of the hill with such striking effect. Wednesday, February 11th. At 10 a.m., we embarked in the police launch kindly lent us by Sir Frank Sudhar for a visit to the caves of Elephanta. 10 miles quick steaming across the harbour, navigated by the smart crew in the pretty uniform of navy blue with scarlet sash and fez, brought us to the so-called jetty. It consists of blocks of stone run out some distance into the sea, but with large spaces left for it to wash between. Hopping over these interstices, we landed and were carried up the hill in a dandy. These wonderful caves are in the hillside, that is to say, they have been sculptured out of the solid wall of rock in its side, having a roof several hundred feet thick. The pillars seem to support the upper mass, but they do not really do so, as in several instances, capitals like huge stalactites are left suspended, the pillar beneath having entirely disappeared. On entering, we find ourselves confronted by monster figures, mythological giants carved in relief on the wall and in the recesses of the cave. One group represents the Amazon goddess Durga, the wife of Shiva, with a single breast. She is riding on the sacred bull, and the face of passive endurance, the large meek eyes of the animal are very characteristic. In a recess part, we see a god and goddess with arms close together, the hands broken, but showing that they were joined. The goddess stand at his right hand, in ancient days the position in marriage, and on both faces there is such a happy expression, the face of the god in particular beaming with a smile, that it leads one to believe they were in the act of being united. There is a crescent concealed in a corner here, while a cross, probably unintentional, can be traced in the bas relief opposite. In this latter, there is a beautiful allegorical picture. The upper part represents a fresco of angels or beings employed in doing good. This is immortality, the higher and better part of life. Whilst below on earth stands Durga in revengeful attitude, holding the bowl for the blood of the victim being sacrificed to her. That is the mortal, the cruel, the lower representation of the Hindu religion. The preservation of these caves is most remarkable. You see palm trees, demons, skulls, the beads of a necklace, the protruding bumps on the forehead of a god, all distinctly preserved, while on the other hand, pillars and legs and arms of the figures are entirely wanting. One wonders how and by what means the one was destroyed and the other preserved. Two inscriptions have been discovered but are at present undecipherable, and the exact date of the cave remains therefore in mystery. They are, however, generally supposed to be about 4,000 years old, and without doubt they originally joined to the mainland. In the afternoon, Sir Jamshedji Jijiboy took us to the Parsee Towers of Silence. Many think the rite of burial as performed by the Parsees by exposing the body on an open tower to be devoured by vultures is not only wanting in respect to the dead but is a revolting and disgusting feature of their religion. I know that the European inhabitants of Bombay cordially participate in the latter feeling. For ourselves, whatever we may have thought or heard previously, after visiting and having explained to us the Tower of Silence, we came away greatly impressed with the beauty of many of the thoughts it suggested. It can hardly be believed what living significance each act has, nor what tender and solemn thoughts rest around the poetic name of the Tower of Silence. Five round white towers stand in different parts of a garden situated amid the palm groves of the hilltop. It is surrounded on two sides by the sea, and the fresh salt breezes are forever blowing over the peninsula and rustling among the palm trees, shining in the utter stillness and silence of all around. According to the Zoroastrian religion, earth, fire, and water are sacred and very useful to mankind, and in order to avoid their pollution by contact with putrefying flesh, the faith strictly enjoins that the dead bodies shall not be buried in the ground, or burnt, or thrown into the sea, rivers, and etc. Therefore, in accordance with these religious injunctions, the towers of silence are always situated on some hill or eminence away from the city. No expense is spared to their construction, that they may last for centuries without the possibility of polluting of the earth or contaminating any living beings dwelling therein. No single soul since the consecration and use of the towers has been allowed to go or see inside them, save only the corpse bearers. These latter are men kept sacred for the purpose, and they are divided into two classes, named Nasalars and Khadiyas. The former, having gone through certain religious ceremonies, are alone privileged to carry the corpse into the towers, whilst the latter act as bearers at the funeral. The model of the tower in the garden shows us their construction. There is a circular platform inside about 300 feet in circumference, which is entirely paved with stone slabs and divided into three rows of shallow open receptacles corresponding with the three moral precepts of the Zoroastrian religion: good deeds, good words, good thoughts. The first row is for corpses of males, the second row is for corpses of females, the third row is for corpses of children. They diminish towards the center in size. Footpaths are left for the corpse bearers to move about on. The clothes wrapped round the bodies are removed and destroyed by being cast into a pit of chloride of lime. Naked we came into this world, and naked we ought to leave it. the Parsees maintain. A deep central well in the tower, the sides and bottom of which are also paved with stone slabs, is used for depositing the dry bones. The corpse is completely stripped of its flesh by vultures within an hour or two of being deposited, and the bones of the denuded skeleton, when perfectly dried up by atmospheric influences and the powerful heat of the tropical sun, are thrown into this well, where they crumble into dust. Thus, the rich and the poor meet together on one level of equality after death. To observe the tenet of Zoroastrian belief that the Mother Earth shall not be defiled, this well is constructed on the following principle. There are holes in the inner sides of the well through which the rainwater is carried into four underground drains at the base of the tower, for it must be remembered that the well, like the rest of the tower, is all exposed and open to the air. At the end of each of these drains, pieces of charcoal and sandstone are placed to act as a filter, thus purifying the water before it enters into the ground. The vultures, nature's scavengers, do their work much more expeditiously than millions of insects would do if dead bodies were buried in the ground. By this rapid process, putrefaction, with all its concomitant evils, is most effectually prevented. Along the straight white road, up the steps, wends the procession, always on foot. The mourners and friends are all clothed in pure white, wear flowing full dress robes, walking in pairs, and each couple are hand in hand and joined together by holding a handkerchief between them in token of sympathetic grief. The body is carried on an iron bier by an appointed bearers. At the gate of the garden it is borne away out of their sight to the chosen tower, where generally some other relative has been previously laid. The mourners may follow it no longer and turn towards the room kept for that purpose, where a religious service is held. It is within sight of the temple where the sacred fire of Zoroaster is eternally kept burning, glimmering out in the silence and darkness of the night to the towers of the dead, shadowing forth the glimmer of truth which is yet found in this ancient religion. Quoting, as I have previously done, from the description of the model of the Tower of Silence as drawn up by the able Parsi secretary, he sums up their religion in the following simple words. According to the Zoroastrian religion, the soul is immortal. Men and women are free moral agents and are responsible to the great Creator for their acts and deeds. In proportion to their good or bad acts and deeds, they meet with rewards or punishments in the next world. Pious and virtuous persons meet with happiness, but the wicked and sinful suffer pain and misery. Thus, as will be seen in the Parsi towers of silence, each act, each form of ceremony shows forth some scriptural type, some moral reason, suggests some holy truth. Apart from these, there is the other important consideration of the benefit thereby obtained to the living. In these latter days, when overcrowded cemeteries and the levelling of graveyards in the midst of our metropolis have called forth the cry of ashes to ashes, dust to dust by some new means, and some means quicker than the old, when even cremation has come within the bounds of possibility, surely the Parsi model of burial will command itself to many foreseeing minds. True that we do not like to think of the vultures hovering around the funeral procession for the last few miles, nor of others awaiting it, perched on and greedily gazing down into the tower. But is it so much worse than the millions of insects of the ground of our burial, of which the Parsees speaks with such horror? All morbid feelings, aggravated by frequent visits of the graveyard, are thus avoided. We are told that 1 hour after the body has passed through that small hole in the tower, it is reduced to its natural state. No gradual decay, no mouldering, scarce any remains. It is known that according to the Parsi burial, each body is reduced to one handful of dust. Thus, within the last half century, more than 50,000 persons have been buried in these towers, and yet there is no end to their capacity for room. The Parsees, as a body, are most enlightened and civilized, and not to be named with the Hindus. They are European in comparison, and without doubt it is in great measuring owing to their true and moral religion, of which the rite of burial, the Tower of Silence, is the most beautiful feature. Thursday, February 12th, C. Met a large influential gathering of representative natives and editors of vernacular press at the Native Public Library, called together by the Honorable K. Telang. They explained to him their views upon the leading Indian questions of the day and dwelt strongly upon the urgent necessity of education for their women. We had a drive in the evening out to Baikala, where many rich Parsi merchants have houses. It was one of those beautiful seashore drives with salt breezes and waving palm trees that makes Bombay, I think, such a pleasant place of residence. Our last day in India had come. It was our farewell remembrance, and India has been by far the most interesting country of our travels hitherto. Who could help being charmed and engrossed with the multitude and antiquity of the monuments of the past? It is not the intention of this volume to give more than a simple account of our travels, but for those who care to study the mystic poetry and religion that is interwoven with the history of the wild tribes who, horde after horde, race after race, pierced through the passes of Afghanistan and from Central Asia, that breeding place of all nations, poured down upon this vast country, there is literature enough already. It is truly said, India forms a great museum of all races in which we can study man from his lowest to the highest stages of culture. The specimens are not fossils or dry bones, but living tribes, each with its own set of curious customs and rites. I have, however, been very unfavorably impressed with an Anglo Indian life, not so much from a man's, perhaps, as from a woman's point of view. If of active temperament, health will in time suffer from exertion during the hot season, and if otherwise inclined, it is a life of such utter laziness as to unfit anyone for life at home afterwards. The social life at civil and military stations is and must always be clique in the extreme. We had grumbled ceaselessly at the atrocious hotels with their cold comfort, at the life and habits in general, at many things Indian and Anglo Indian, and yet now turning homewards, our feelings were softened, and we were sorry to think of leaving another of the new countries seen, and to think that another period of proscribed time had slipped away so quickly. Henceforth, our travels were destined to be on beaten tracks. With a sigh of pleasurable regret, we stood on the deck of the P&O steamer Peshawar and steamed past the ugly docks and frontage which must create such an unfavorable impression on new arrivals to Bombay, looked our last on Bag Bay and on Colaba Lighthouse, on Malabar Point and Malabar Hill. We stood out to sea and lost sight of Indian soil in the growing dusk of twilight. End of chapter 20.